Hey guys, hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Kshitij, and on this channel we talk about robotics, research, and academia. Today's video is on a very hot topic and a very requested topic on time management and overcoming procrastination in research. So before we begin on how to overcome procrastination and how to manage your time effectively, first of all, let us understand what is procrastination. So procrastination is essentially barriers or resistance that you create for yourself, um, occasionally stemming from self-doubt and overcomplication, right? So you're thinking too much about the problem that you're trying to solve, which results in self-doubt. So you start questioning yourself, um, which results in a lot of negative emotions, right? I can't do it. I don't want to do it. Maybe I'd rather check Instagram. Maybe I can spend time with friends, go for a dinner party or whatever. So you start deflecting, right? And you start looking for distractions and other sources that would satiate you immediately, as opposed to, taking on the work up front. So that usually results in procrastination, where instead of doing the work you're supposed to do, you start doing some other things to keep your mind busy and off the actual topic. Now, in research, this is can be and will be very brutal because no matter how relaxed and how self-paced you think you're going with your research, it's always a ticking clock. So you're counting down from the day you signed up for doing a degree, be it a master's thesis or a PhD thesis. It's always a countdown timer. Now it's up to you whether you want to do it in 6 years, 10 years, 20 years. No one's stopping you. But the problem is, are you happy if you do it in 20 years? Or are you happier if you do it in 3? Are you happier if you do it in 1 month? That's for you to decide, right? So it all boils down to managing your time effectively, staying motivated, and overcoming procrastination as and when it happens. So now the million-dollar question, how do you do all of that, right? So in this video, as opposed to citing scientific articles and research papers that talk about procrastination, why it happens, and user studies, what I'm going to tell you more about is from my own personal experience over the years, some things that have helped me, which I hope might help you as well. Right? So take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying this is a one-size-fits-all solution, but these are just some pointers for you to think about and come up with your own methods that might help you. So number one that I always think about before I even start taking up any work and start doing it is, identifying the blocks of time in a day where my mind is, very positive. I'm feeling very energetic, and my mind is ready to get engaged in the task. So some people might feel it early in the morning. Some people might feel it late at night. Some people might feel it in the noon. Whatever is your so-called Zen moment, right? So when your brain is in the moment and is totally focused, identify those first. Number two, your work environment is quite effective, and it's very important that you take it very seriously. So, now everybody's working from home, so you might be tempted to take a book and lie down on a sofa or lay in bed and read something. Don't do that. If you want to be effective in your work, what I have felt is you need to have a dedicated study desk or a work desk. You have to do the effort to, move your ass from your bed, get to the desk and sit down. On your desk, you should have no distractors. In my room, where I'm studying and where I'm working, I have no TVs, no radios, no nothing, no distractions whatsoever. The only thing that I do have is a window that opens outdoors, and it lets some fresh sunlight come in, so it energizes me and keeps me motivated. So find something like that. It could be a motivational quote, it could be a painting, whatever you think motivates you every time you look at it. When I was doing my PhD, I even wrote down why I started. So you should always have a reason why you started, right? So you felt very strongly when you signed up for a degree. So if you want, you could write that down as a very strong self-motivator and stick it in front of you, so that every time you get to your work desk, you sit down, that's the first thing you see, right? So if we have your Zen moment sorted, we have your work desk sorted, and there are no distractors whatsoever. Now comes the million-dollar question of how do you manage your time as a researcher, and how do you not procrastinate, right? So I'm going to quickly share my screen and show you two effective tools that I've come to kind of believe that might be of use for you guys as well. So here we go. Right. So here we are on my screen, and what you're seeing is another Notion template, right? So there is a calendar view and there is a timeline view. So you could pick whichever one you want. Just like before in my literature review database video, which I link up in the I button above, as we did, I released the public template for everybody else to clone and modify as they want. The same will apply to this template as well. I'll release it open source. You'll find the link in the description, clone it and modify it to your liking, right? So the biggest source of procrastination that I have found by talking to other peers that I've had over the years and other students that I've mentored over the years is that, they think of the task as a whole. So say you want to think about writing a PhD thesis when you're just getting started. You probably think about 200 something pages, several thousand words, 200 to 300 citations. That's quite a big gargantuan task, right? So you don't want to think about that task as a whole. Divide and conquer should be your mantra. So in this calendar view is essentially what I have thought of is, whenever you sign up for a degree, there is some sort of loose requirements set by the university already, right? So maybe 2 conference papers, 1 journal paper is the minimum that you have to go for you to graduate. Just as an example, different universities have different requirements, so modify it accordingly, right? But for the sake of this argument, let's just say, okay, you want 2 conference papers and 1 journal paper, and then you could arrange them into your thesis later on, right? So, okay, that's dividing your thesis down already into 2 conference and 1 journal paper. But don't stop there, right? Every manuscript has sections. Every manuscript has literature review. So break it down even further. Now here is where it could come in handy to use this template from Notion, right? So let me do a quick mock trial with you as to how I would do it if I were doing my thesis again. So if I were to say that I am going for a conference paper, right? So normally what people do is they wait for the work to finish before they start looking for which conference to aim for. I have a slightly different way of doing things here. So I kind of anticipate ahead of time a reasonable amount of time that I would need for writing a manuscript. So let's say for a conference paper, I need 3 months, 4 months, whatever you think is relevant for your domain, right? So I already look up 4 months ahead from the day I'm starting to plan my time, and I pick up a conference of my choice and I say, okay, so that's their deadline. So that's my 1 week before that is my internal deadline. By that time, I need to have a manuscript. Fine. And then I work backwards from there, right? So let's say 1 week before that, you've identified, and this is the conference paper 1 that you have marked in your calendar from the start till that deadline that you need the manuscript ready, and you probably need to run it by your professor or your collaborators or whatever, right? So till your internal deadline. So the way this template works is you set a date from the start and finish. You can even set a time because some conferences work in US time zones, others might be more regional time zones or whatever. So there's an option to do that. You can set the status, whether you've started working on that or not yet, or you're still thinking or whatever, right? Then, as I said, every manuscript has sections. So break them down here. So here I've only done 2 as an example, right? So I have an abstract, you need an introduction, you also need a literature review, and yada, 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 right? So, okay, let's try to see how we can use this. So I'm going to duplicate this property and I'm going to call it lit review, okay? Then I'm going to add a date. Let's say I need 3 days to do it and I need my end time, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and I also want a reminder 1 day before. Okay, so this alarm clock will basically be your reminder. So you'll be reminded and notified that you have a checkpoint coming T minus 24 hours, right? So like this, you build up all the sections of the manuscript that you're aiming for. And then you kind of put the deadlines, you would kind of prioritize in one of 2 ways. One is, go for the low-hanging fruit. So for example, if you've already seen the literature review video that I link up in the I button already, there we have prepared a database of the literature that you're reading, over the days. So at that time, you're not reading, thinking of a particular conference on a journal paper you're trying to write. You're just kind of developing your own knowledge. So you're reading extensively, right? That's normal for thesis writing. So from that database, when you kind of identify, a research gap and you want to write a conference paper or a journal paper, there would be a particular subset of those references that would be relevant for this manuscript, the one that you want to write. I call it as a very low-hanging fruit, right? So even if you don't want to write out what was done in those papers, in that database, we had the bib entry for all of the papers, right? So just copy paste them into your bib file of the manuscript, and voila, there you have a list of references for the scope of that manuscript. And that's already a task done for this task of writing the conference paper, which eventually feeds to the big task of writing your thesis. So I hope you understand to this mock example where I'm going, right? So we are trying to backtrack from the big problem, break it down into smaller problems, and then start off with the lowest hanging fruit so that you have the least resistance, because it's like, it's right there. You will not see a reason why not to do it. When you want to procrastinate, your brain is giving you negative signals because it wants to find a million reasons for you to not do it. It is a sort of a game where you have to let go of your negative emotions and nurture your positive emotions. That's why I told you to look for your Zen moments. There might be times where you would be frustrated. Every human is an emotional being, so you won't have the same emotions all day, every day. You would be going through different emotions at different times of the day. So when you're frustrated, when you're agitated, when something happened in your personal life, or for whatever reason you're not feeling the mood, don't force yourself to do it. And this is where I find this timeline very useful, right? So you have a deadline. You may not be feeling in the proper mindset to do it now. Maybe you'll feel it in a couple of hours. Maybe you'll feel it the next day, right? So sometimes, depending on what actually happened in your life that got you off the track, right? So you might need some time to readjust and realign your energies. That's completely fine. If you try to force yourself, this is exactly what the brain does, right? So it's going to come up with a million reasons why you shouldn't do things. So try not to force yourself too much, but you should use this timeline for this very reason, right? So imagine you set a timeline. So you had a date for this, right? So let's say your introduction was due on the April 13th, which is today. Well, let's change the date to April 16th. Right, so it's due on the April 16th, and let's say for the next 2 days, for whatever reason, I don't feel the energy to do it, which means I'm procrastinating. But let's say I am convincing myself that I have a reason why I shouldn't do it. Fine, okay. But then remember, of these 3 to 4 days that I kept for writing the introduction, I've lost 2, which means now I have to work even harder for the other 2 days that I have left. So this timeline basically, it's like a waterfall effect. So if I delay anything from the introduction, it will fall back on the other sections. And then at some point, I'll have to work harder than what I should have for that segment. That's why I really like this timeline, because, it kind of sets my mind on track, and it doesn't kind of lay a hard boundary around me, because that's what mind doesn't like. Getting orders from anyone, including yourself, it doesn't like it. It starts to come up with reason of how to evade everything, right? So that's how I would do it, right? And then I would do it for different tasks, arrange them into a calendar view. You could even arrange them into a timeline view, and then you could see, when you should start which task, are you getting delayed or whatnot. This helps you manage your entire dissertation. That's why I call it the dissertation timeline, right? So whether you're doing a master thesis or PhD thesis or some other bachelor thesis, for example, break things down, divide and conquer. Don't directly aim for the stars, right? You probably land up at the moon anyways, and then you'll see yourself as a failure, and then everything falls back from there, right? So self-doubt, frustration, agitation, lack of confidence, and then the next task will suffer, and then the next task, and then everything falls apart, right? So quick recap of what we just talked about. Break down your entire thesis into smaller chunks. Typically, conferences have preset deadlines, so use them as an internal deadline for yourself, because if you just pick up an arbitrary deadline, then you would always be tempted to keep pushing it and postponing things, because you can, it's your own deadline. But for a conference, you have very little liberty to do that, because the conference usually doesn't extend the deadlines, right? So when the conference says it's on a certain date, it will be on a certain date, and it's up to you to make sure the manuscript is ready by then. So use this calendar to kind of, jot down the things. And I personally find this better than Google Calendar because it sends reminders, it has a timeline view, it's just a bit neater, plus the other Notion templates that I'm kind of showing you. So you could make a full dashboard, which I will release eventually when I'm done making all the videos. So this is going to be your dashboard with everything embedded here. So this is the timeline that we're talking about today, right? So that's tool number one that I use. Now tool number two, right, which is Clockify. This is this app/tool that I use as well for the nitty-gritty tracking, right? So let's say we broke down the literature review into writing the conference manuscript into blocks, and one of the blocks was literature review, and I took like a copy paste of the literature from my database and I prepared it. But the job doesn't end there, right? So the next obvious step would be to start expanding on them, start writing them, what was done in the work, start positioning the papers and things like that. So you'd have to dedicate some time, and that's a bit more finer detail than what could be tracked in there, right? So you are very welcome to modify the template and do it there as well. So I did like a bit broader classification here, like literature review, everything was classified in here. But if you want, you could say, okay, read 5 papers, read 2 papers, read whatever, and keep adding deadlines right there. Or you could use an app like this, which says, okay, so you start a time tracker, right? So I'm like I did here. So you could write whatever doing X, Y, Z, or whatever you're doing for your research. You could write it out here. You could prepare a task for the project. So for example, I am making a task as literature review. So I could allocate it to my task as literature review. And then I hit start, right? So then it will start logging your time, how much time you're dedicating for whatever it is that you're doing now. And when you're done, you just hit stop. In case if you forget something, you could also manually come in and enter that, but I recommend not to do it because then you'll be tempted to cheat yourself by kind of manipulating the numbers. Don't do it. So just use the start stop feature here. And it's like a auto clock, and it will make a diary log, like an entry, time entry for you that day, right? And once you're done making the entries, you could go to the calendar view and you could see nitty-gritty details of how much time you have spent, 30 minutes on this day, 1 hour on this day, and so on and so forth. You could even go to the dashboard view, which shows, okay, what you were doing on which day. You could look up reports, which is something I like as well. So it will kind of show you a pie chart of what all things that you dedicate your time, and you could set the time frame to be weekly, monthly. So you could do your own kind of audit or review of how you invested your time, right? And like this, you could keep track of, how much time you need to read 1 paper, 2 papers, 5 papers, whatever checkpoints that you keep for yourself. So for the nitty-gritty tracking, I like to use this app, Clockify.me. So just go in here and create an account and play around with this and, start using Clockify. And for the high level tracking, so writing a conference paper, like the milestone kind of tracking, milestone level tracking, I like to use this Notion template, which both of these tools, I'll link it down in the description below, right? Now, here's a bonus tip for you if you're still watching this video, rewards. Motivation is very important for you to keep on going, right? And motivation normally breaks down when the momentum breaks down. When does the momentum break down? One, again, your brain starts to resist things, you're not liking things, you have emotional turbulence going on, or let's say you submit a paper and gets rejected and you start feeling frustrated, like it's not worth it, like what's happening to me, and why me, and a whole bunch of self-doubt. Like anything and everything that stems self-doubt will lead you to break the momentum. But here's what you need to do. 2 things. One is rewards. Reward yourself for every small achievement you've made. If you plan to read 1 paper today and you successfully did it, reward yourself with a snack of your choice, or with spending time with your family, with reading a chapter of your favorite book, or keep it small, but do reward yourself, right? So for instance, if somebody were to invite me to a barbecue party and I have a milestone that I've kept for myself, I wouldn't accept the offer. Why? Because I see that as a reward worthy enough for when I have completed, let's say, writing the conference manuscript and I've given it to my professor, so I can be sure that the deadline that I kept for myself, I'll make it, right? So then I would reward myself after submission. I'd reward myself with that pending barbecue party invite. If the friend is no longer available, I'll come up with a plan B. But so that's why I keep two kinds of rewards. The small rewards, which is for every small success that I make, I reward myself so that I can remind myself that I am capable of doing it. Self-affirmations are very important because remember, if you don't do it yourself, nobody else is going to do it for you, right? So affirm your belief that you have what it takes and you're doing what it takes to get where you need to be. So the small reward. And the big reward, when you've achieved a big enough milestone, take a proportional reward for that as well. So sometimes when I'm done submitting a journal, which is quite a bit of work, I take like a 1 day off, 2 day off, or sometimes I go for a travel or whatever, depending on how you distinguish between small reward and big reward. So always, always, always motivate yourself, because remember, it's all an emotional game. It's all up here in your head, and you need to keep reminding yourself that you've got this and you can do this, right? So these are some of the tools and some of the ways that I use to manage my time, stay motivated, and overcome procrastination. I hope you found these tips useful. Do like and share it with other fellow researchers, especially early stage researchers, and comment down below and let me know if you have other additional tips. Let's all learn from each other. Thank you for watching this video and hope you have a nice day.